Hi, everybody. Roger Connect, president of Universal Accounting Center. Today, I'm speaking with Brittany Brown. She is owner and founder, president of Ledger Gurus, and she has a thriving accounting practice where she's working mostly with e-commerce companies, but for the last 4 years has grown her business quite dramatically to the point where she actually has 40 employees now. And this is something that I think you're all going to appreciate, which is an onboarding discussion of how you actually take on new clients. And I'm sure all of us can basically share stories of experiences we've had where we've had ahas occur and so forth. I think this is just going to be an amazing opportunity to kind of talk through how to avoid that and how to have the best onboarding experience for both ourselves and the client. So Brittany, how would you like to start this?
Sure. So let's just dive in. I'll tell you a little bit about me. So like Roger mentioned, I'm the CEO of Ledger Gurus. We've been in business about 4 years and have had just a lot of growth during that period of time. One of the things that I think has really helped us is what I would call iterating to success. So I think a lot of times, especially as accountants, it's tempting for us to want something to be perfect. We want that number to tie out exactly. We want to find that 1 cent that we can't reconcile. And so sometimes it can be hard to start a process when we know it's not ultimately how we want it to be, but we really don't get better at things until we start at one point and then start iterating on it. So one of the things that I think has really helped us be successful is to start processes wherever we are and then improve upon them until we come out with a working model. So that's really a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is iterating our way to success on that.
I really like that. One of the things that I think is tempting is to kind of shoot from the hip and adapt as things come up. And what I'm hearing you say is something that I think a lot of accountants would appreciate, which is we are kind of the sticklers for detail. We like processes. We like being able to determine and expect certain things. So this is exactly what we need.
Right. So I think sometimes we'd rather not start anything at all than to do something less than perfect. And so this is one of those things that you really have to iterate your way into success. So I am. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because we have come quite a ways on this. I think we have improvements we can continue to make, but the way we do it now and the way we used to do it really is night and day. So as Roger indicated, because we specialize in e-commerce clients, the onboarding process on that can be particularly complex because we're not just accessing bank accounts and QuickBooks files. We're often accessing seller platforms, payment processors, shipping accounts, 3PLs, inventory tools. The amount of stuff that we have to access during the onboarding process to be successful is a much longer list than it used to be. And so I think that's part of what's helped us to get a little bit more like process oriented about it, has been the complexity of that. But so one of the things I want to start with is just this quote that I used in another section as well about assessing new clients. And that is the fact that this happiness equals reality minus expectations is a big part of what helps us determine whether or not our processes are successful or not, because one of the things we do with our clients every step of the way is we need to be managing their expectations. And it really doesn't matter to them whether it looks like this or whether it looks like this, as long as that's reasonable. What really matters to them is what they were expecting and how closely we come to lining up with their expectations on that. So learning to manage expectations is a big part of onboarding successfully.
Well said. Thank you.
Yep. So let's talk about learning objectives of this really quick. First of all, we want to understand the importance of an onboarding process. We want to be able to create a roadmap for taking a client from assessment to fulfillment. We want to contract a positive and not so positive onboarding experience and identify some tools and processes that you can use along the way to improve your own processes. So one of the things that I've learned along the way is that successful onboarding is dependent on a successful client assessment. So that's one of the best places to start, is to start with your assessing process and understand the way that they build upon each other. During the onboarding process, there's really like three different, in the ways that the onboarding process and the assessment process kind of go hand in hand. This is the way that I would say that continuum flows, is that you assess the client, but there's a lot of key data you gather during that assessment that then enables the onboarding process. And then there's a critical step where you pass from onboarding onto the team that's actually going to be doing the execution. Oftentimes, this process actually involves 3 people, somebody who did the sales and the assessment part, somebody who's usually managing the onboarding, and somebody who will be doing the ongoing work going forward. And so there's critical data that passes from one step to the other, and gathering that and having a plan for making sure key data isn't lost is probably one of the most important parts of a successful onboarding as well.
You know, Brittany, I want to jump in right here. I think there's something that I've learned that I'd like to share, which is if you have a very clear and concise onboarding process, it really does help in the sales stage to get a better closing rate and engagement rate, simply because if you're able to explain in the sales process that you have this experience that they can look forward to, that they can anticipate, that they see that you're actually organized and you've done this enough that you actually have this process thought out, it's helpful. It's kind of like, and if I may, it's like going and being told you need to have an operation. And let's assume it's a simple one, it's a same day operation. But how much more comfortable is it as a patient to know even the days before the operation, here's what's going to happen. You're going to come in at 7. We're going to have you do this. We're going to do at 8 o'clock this. We're going to have you meet the nurse at this time. If you get that whole walkthrough, I think your nerves go down dramatically simply because of the fact that as a patient, you're not unaware of what's happening. So there's no fear of the unknown in essence. And so your client's going through the same experience. Yes, they want you to do the accounting, but what does that mean? How much of their life is this going to consume in the coming weeks and months? How many mistakes are going to be made along the way? And if you can reassure them that you've done this, I think it does help that assessment go so much easier. You get the client, and then the onboarding is then meeting that expectation.
Right. I totally agree. And that brings me to my next slide, which is that onboarding is really your chance to shine. So if you have a good onboarding process and it's evident and clear to the client that you're not just shooting from the hip and that you have done this before and that you know what you're doing and that they're in good hands, their level of confidence really, really grows in you as a firm. Like, this is your opportunity to help them feel like, wow, I really made the right decision. This is going to be a really good experience working with them. Or make them rethink the wisdom of their choice and think, gosh, these guys have no idea what they're doing. It's clear that there's a total mess behind the scenes, or somewhere in the middle on that. But really onboarding. So I mentioned that onboarding was a continuum for us, an iteration towards success. And the way that I knew that we had finally gotten somewhere was we had a couple of onboarding calls with new clients where the clients literally raved at the end of it about, this was such a good experience. You guys clearly know what you're doing. I have such confidence in our working with you going forward because you guys have such wisdom and knowledge about what it is that I'm dealing with, and you knew exactly what you were doing. And they hadn't started working with us yet. We had just gone through onboarding, but it was evident to them that we had a process together and that we were ready to go. So onboarding is a chance to really shine. And it's, you know, what they say, like, first impressions are everything. Yeah. And, you know, the sales, if you can have a great process in sales and you can have a great process on the onboarding, then you're off to a great foot. Then you're off to a great start. So here's some indicators of less than great onboarding experiences. So if you're currently experiencing any of these in your onboarding, it's probably time to overhaul your processes. So making up the onboarding process on the fly each time you get a new client. The fulfillment team for whom the work lands on has absolutely no idea what's going on. You're manually sending emails, which the client is ignoring. The partner or whoever did the sell doesn't talk to the client again after the sell is closed. It takes more than 60 days to get to the actual engagement. I would actually drop that. I would say it takes more than 30 days to get to the actual engagement. The client is texting you after hours and you are avoiding the new client. So I have had all these happen to me. And so if you're experiencing any of these, it's probably an indicator that it's time to overhaul some processes.
So I'm going to just share.
Go ahead. Yeah.
With regards to the communication, whether it be they're avoiding or they're not meeting with, or you're avoiding them. One of the things that I think is important is to establish what's the best method of communication. One, setting an expectation for them of how is best to reach you. Is it a call? Is it a text? Is it an email? When are you available? When are the better days and such? But the converse is true. How is it best to reach them, and how do they prefer to be communicated with? And that I think starts to address these things. And Sure, I'm bringing up something that you're going to mention, but the point is this is where you're setting the expectations, and you've learned with these unfortunate experiences.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm going to talk about later, but I'll give you a sneak preview on this also, is that one of the things we highly recommend is that somebody in your firm be actually responsible for the onboarding process, and typically not somebody who is actually on the fulfillment team. And the reason for this is onboarding can be stressful and hard to engage in if you're the fulfillment team, because it's the point at which, like Roger mentioned, going into surgery, when you have no idea what to expect and you don't know anything about what you're getting yourself into, people tend to kind of avoid that. And so if you just kind of make a throw over the fence introduction, okay, great, here's your new accountant, see you guys later. That new accountant already probably has other clients that they're working on, and they're going to focus, just by natural default of human nature, they're going to be inclined to focus their time and attention on the things that are familiar and the things that they know. So this new client that just got landed, if it's the job of the new accountant to go through all of this process, they are less likely to dig in and really engage in this. And so this is where we get situations where weeks go by, nothing's really happened, the client hasn't really been engaged with, the new accountant hasn't really broken down the issues to make the engagement familiar, because at this point there's so much, it's just overwhelming. So it just gets backseated until pretty soon the client's like, wait a minute, are you guys doing this? Are you not doing this? And the accountant becomes less and less inclined to engage, because now time has gone by and now they're a little embarrassed. So by having somebody else who's involved in the onboarding process, who owns it, the sales team just passes the baton to an onboarding person. The onboarding person actually goes through most of the work to get things where they need to be, and that's very vague, most of the rest of the work. We're actually going to get into that in just a minute, details on that. So that by the time it actually lands with the fulfillment team, most of that unknown has been removed, and they have a much better idea of what they're getting themselves into, and they have access to all the resources they need for success. They're much more likely to dig in right away. Love it. Absolutely love it. Wonderful. Okay, so let's talk about first, when we land a new client, there's an internal part of the onboarding that happens first. So we have an internal onboarding process and an external onboarding process. So the first thing we do when we get a signed engagement letter from a new client that says, or a proposal that says, yes, I want to work with you, signed contract, we kick off this internal. The first thing that we do is we talk to what we call our service delivery director. She's the one who kind of makes decisions based on which direction new engagements are going. She's responsible for staffing new engagements and stuff like that. So, but whoever's making those decisions needs to identify who this engagement is going to. And this is usually for us based on the background of the client, what industry they're in, the specializations of the teams that we have, understanding what's going to work for them. Sometimes location is a factor. Usually it's not. The expertise and personality. So we make a decision based on all sorts of factors: who has the availability, the right team for this to go to. And as soon as we've determined the right team, then we also launch a process of preparing all the systems behind the scenes. So I'll show you guys a list in just a second of what that covers, but basically it's like, what are we going to be using? Are we setting up a doc for this client? Are we setting up a password keeper for them? Are we setting up a shared inbox? Like all the things that we determine that we need for our clients, we launch IT onto a project where they set up all of these resources. And last of all, internally, we communicate key data with the team that's actually going to be doing the fulfillment. And at this point, we're also communicating this. So this is where we take the data from saying, who sold the engagement, what communication did they gather along the way. That information needs to go to the person in charge of onboarding, and then it needs to be spread to all the people who are going to be involved in the engagement itself. So this is a form that we use to gather information during the assessment process. And not only does this help us be more deliberate about the types of things we're assessing, but when it's all filled out, which looks like this, and this document's actually about 15 pages long, this becomes then like the Bible that moves forward from that point forward with the client and with all their data. So as we're communicating to the onboarding specialist and then to the fulfillment team what the needs are, this documentation, something that they can read through, glance through. It's broken up into different sections on like things like payment processors, payroll, bill pay needs, sales tax, all that kind of stuff. They can go to the section that they need and get an idea of what's going to be happening. And so one of the most important things that this does is it allows us to not have to go back and re-ask the client a whole bunch of information that we've already gathered from them, because we did a pretty thorough assessment during the assessment process to determine how we were going to price the engagement, what they were going to need from us. And so much of what we gathered during the sales process is exactly what the onboarding team and the fulfillment team are going to need. So some of the ways that we have done this is that we have also had, still do this to some degree, is whoever made the sales call is responsible to then have a kickoff call with the internal team before the sales call ever happens, where after they've read through this document, that fulfillment team has a chance to ask any questions, that things that weren't clear, because I take my notes this way, a lot of it looks like chicken squabble, scratch. And so, they're asking me for clarifications on what does this note mean? What are we doing here? And anything that wasn't clear in this. So when we're getting ready to launch internal resources, these are some of the areas that we consider. So first of all, at a sale close, how is it transitioning? So for us, we're saying this engagement letter is signed, and that's the cue to pass the baton. So sales is responsible to get the contract signed, and then the baton is passed. The way that happens with us is that we make an email introduction to the client and to the onboarding manager. So it'll say something like, thank you so much for the signed contract. We're really excited to be working with you. Here is, in our case, her name's Denise. Here is Denise. She will be walking you through the onboarding process and letting you know what you can expect. And she'll also be and then she'll respond and say, hey, so-and-so and so, we're really excited to work with you. These are some things that are going to be coming up over the next couple of weeks. We're going to have this meeting, then this meeting will be asking for this and this and this. So the baton passes with that email introduction, and now it's the onboarding manager's responsibility to pass it from her to the fulfillment team. Another thing to consider is all the internal IT resources that need to be set up. This will be really dependent on the workflow of your particular engagements, what types of resources you use, what types of tools you use. To kick off things that are needed from client. So in our case, for example, we require the client to sign an ACH form allowing us to pull funds for the engagements. So we're not, chasing them down for AR and stuff. So that's part of our housekeeping is a list of additional things that the client has to sign. One of the most important things we do during this point also is we identify what the access points are going to be that are needed. So this starts in the sales process with that documentation, but it's really the onboarding manager who then makes a list of all the access points needed, because one of the things we do that we'll talk about in just a second is an access call. Then she'll determine what meetings need to happen and when they need to happen, and she starts the process now of like our internal calendars, reaching out to the client to check with their availability. This is one of the things we intend to improve, by the way. We are still trying to automate is this process, because this is really painful for the onboarding manager. She's usually having to get 3 or 4 people on a call at the same time. That right now is not done very efficiently. There's a lot of internal emails that go back and forth where we try to find windows of time, and then she emails the client asking them. But there's all sorts of calendaring tools that you can use to make that more streamlined. And then we consider the phases and the steps. So this document here was one of our early iterations on our onboarding process. And we still follow a lot of this, but the first thing we did was we actually mapped it out so we understood what the different phases were, what we needed to accomplish in each phase, and who needed to plug in at different times. So the process starts with the signed engagement letter. This is one of the things that has changed. Like I mentioned, this was an early iteration, but this I think was really representative of where we started and how it allowed us to improve upon it. So this says that we have a kickoff meeting with the client next, where we do all of this, including setting expectations, all of that kind of stuff. This meeting now comes for us at the very end of a lot of other things. And this is, so after this kickoff meeting, this is what our early phases of the onboarding look like. It says count setup, migration, understanding AP, AR, all that kind of stuff. This stuff now comes before kickoff meeting. So we're now setting a lot of this stuff up internally and getting a lot of this stuff set up before the kickoff call. Our goal now is that when that kickoff meeting with the client happens, that's the trigger of we are now rolling forward on this. We're still in an onboarding phase. So with our clients, we say, the first phases of this engagement will involve cleanup, and then after that there will be like tying out loose ends, and then after that there's like this onboarding acceptance review meeting where we say you are out of this phase, we are officially in ongoing work. And the reason why this is important is because we have expectations established with our clients about deliverables, like financials, when they'll be delivered, what will be delivered as part of those financials, etc. And oftentimes we can't meet those deadlines during the onboarding phase, because if we're still reconciling like 2 years worth of bank accounts that were never reconciled, we can't like sign and tie out on this month's financials yet, because we're bringing reconciliations up to date.
Yeah.
Typically there is a process involved in that, and a point where we say we're officially done with this phase of onboarding, and now you can expect this, 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 and this. So that really comes to like managing their expectations along the way. Roger, is there anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, so I was actually going to jump in. One of the things that I think is important to share in this part of the discussion is when it relates to the cleanup and you're onboarding a client, there has to be, I think, a psychological but also a literal ownership of the data. There's got to be a point where you're able to say that all the previous data is either cleaned up or it's as good as it's going to get. But from this forward, we own the numbers. If there's a problem moving forward, it's our issue. You can't lay blame on anything in the past after today. And so I do believe that as you're onboarding a client, you do need to become familiar with all the past numbers and what's happening. And you've got to get to a point where there's this line in the sand where you say to the client, this stage is over, we own everything moving forward. And if there's anything wrong, I mean, you're not saying it this way to them, obviously, but if there's anything wrong, you've got to be able to own it. You can't give any excuses from this point forward. So it's, I think, a very important stage of this whole onboarding process, because there is this element of you're either absorbing a client that has not been doing accounting, and there's this mesh of things that need to be figured out, or you're transitioning from someone else who's been responsible for the accounting, who either moved on in their role, they retired, it's some other firm, whatever the case may be, you're picking it up from someone else. Well, that line of, from this day forward, we own this, is very, very important, if not with the client, at least internally. Right.
That's so true, and it's so important, because if you come into an engagement and they've had a disaster of an accounting situation for sometimes years coming up to that point, they're going to be inclined to hold you responsible for numbers before that time. And it's important for you to manage that expectation and say, this was the agreement we made, this is where we're at. From this point forward, see here we say acceptance of onboard phase completion, where they have a chance to say, yes, we've accomplished what we agreed to, or you have a chance to say, you never paid us for a cleanup, we talked about that in the sales process and you opted out, and therefore from this point forward, we are responsible for this data, but not this data.
Yep.
So, the client is engaging with this phase of stuff, but one of the things I want to really hone in on is that in terms of this presentation, all of what we've talked about so far is pre-kickoff with the client. And the reason why I'm showing this is because in order to really identify the things that your firm needs to do prior to this kickoff, you need to have an idea of your process and your flow. So this was an early iteration of ours. Part of the reason why I'm showing this and not the way we're doing it right now is because we've changed the way we're doing it, and our format of how we do it is completely different, which I'm going to show with you guys in just a second. But this really helped us identify where the pain points were, where the risk points were, certain things like that. I mean, but the way this looked before we started to really iterate towards success on this was that I was the salesperson. I was also the onboarding person, and I'm not terribly process oriented myself. It's never been one of my strengths. One of my strengths has been plugging people in around me who are process oriented, because I'm not. And so what would happen is a client and I would talk, and they'd say, yes, we want to go with you. And I'd say, great. And then it would take us a couple weeks for me to get a signed engagement letter back, or maybe we would even kick off the engagement and start running without an engagement letter in place, and we'd have to go back and try to make that happen. Maybe we would discover a couple months later that that step had never been taken. Same thing the first time we tried to bill a client, that's when we would discover the ACH letter had never been signed. And then this part, the acceptance of the onboard phase completion, never really happened either. And so there was this constant like expectation disconnect. And so mapping this out helped us really define and improve all the systems that came forward from there. So whether this is what yours looks like or not, this is a great starting point to help understand the flow of everything.
So just to kind of chime in here for all the listeners, one of the things that I think is helpful is this does vary client to client. And what I mean client to client, I should say firm to firm.
Your firm, yeah, your clients.
I work with accounting firms, and so therefore my clients are the firms. So this varies, and I've seen it in a few ways. One, I've seen it by personnel, meaning it's simply who's doing what and in what sequence, and it's assigned to individuals what they're doing. And so if you could visualize what this shows here with the blue, the greens, and the yellows, instead of processes, it's individuals. This person's getting involved at this point. This person comes next. These two are together. And so if you're designing this for your own firm, one of the things you can consider is who are the people that are going to be touching the client along the way and in what sequence and with what responsibility. The other way to look at this is autonomous of the people and simply say, let's not worry about who's doing it. Let's worry about what the experience needs to be. What are the tasks that need to be accomplished? And if you lay them out, you'll find that in some instances you can start to overlay them, and all of a sudden the tasks and the people become a little bit more clear. Now, some people don't go to the point where they visually draw out this. What they do is they actually come up with forms, and they have pages. Page 1 is this, page 2 is this, page 3. That becomes the process because they're sequential. So however you choose to do it in your firm, Brittany's doing a wonderful job here explaining the fact that it's not ad hoc, it's not from the hip, it's intentional, it's deliberate, and it's, here's the thing, it's systematized. It's going to be the same with the next client.
Yeah. And you can't improve it if you don't define it. That's the other thing that we found. So where Roger's talking about like the people involved, you see down the side here, we have client, manager, bookkeeper. This actually now, there's an onboarding manager that's involved in this. There's an IT team that's involved in this. And it wasn't, I mean, by really defining where we started, obviously this looks completely different now. It allowed us to say, this is where we're at today. This is where we'd like it to be. And every step along the way, we could improve and iterate with a plan in place. So this is more what it looks like for us today. We use a tool called Asana to manage this. And basically our Asana checklist with onboarding now is about 130 items long, and it's broken out according to the department and people that own it. So when we sign a new contract with a client and I send that email over to Denise, one of the first things she does is she launches a template inside Asana. All of these tasks are preloaded. If you look over to the right side, you can see the people who are responsible for each of these tasks. This is also preloaded. So when she launches that template with the new client's name on it, all of these tasks pre-populate for all the people that are involved. And then she'll go through and she'll say, well, this client, doesn't need this, or this, and they do need this, and this. But it becomes like a tickler where she can then plan exactly what this particular client's needing based on this template that's been built out. So this is our current iteration, and this is a far cry over what we used to be doing, and I would say this is working really smoothly now. The thing that we're working on now for our next iteration is higher levels of automation. So it's things like using tools like Infusionsoft to automate the process. So signed engagement letter comes over. This is the templated email that Denise sends out. Off it goes. Other things like maybe we're going to have a video embedded in that has something like me as a CEO welcoming the client. We're so excited to be working with you. This is what you can expect. So now that we have this iteration in process, we're now working on refining it even more and looking for additional opportunities for automation, figuring out where we can use Zapier to automate things. Like I mentioned, that calendaring process that right now is quite painful for Denise to try to get 4 people all on a call at the same time. Tools that will automate this. So each step that we've taken, we've improved, and we're a far cry from where we were 2 years ago. far cry from where we were 4 years ago. 4 years ago, this whole process wasn't even like recognizable as onboarding. It looked more like grabbing a new client, throwing it at somebody and running. That's what it looked more like. So, but this process today is significantly better than it was before.
Let me jump in here. This is something that I've experienced a number of times, so I think this is something that a lot of people can identify with, and it's basically you see someone who, like you, has automated this and inspire, and sometimes it's even intimidating, like, oh my heavens, I'm not even close to that yet. And so I just want to kind of baby step this and simply say that the first thing you need to do is you need to get some experience onboarding clients and figure out what do you like your clients to experience. And once you create then the system, you need to document the system. And I've seen this done with literally Post-it notes on a wall, and you just are organizing Post-it notes to say who does what, who does where, the colors are people, and so forth. So the point is you need to visually put this together, and then you need to, like you were explaining, you need to go through a few iterations to see, do you like it? Once you have that, I've seen a lot of people actually go then to papers and have a paper process. The paper process allows you to physically move a file from one person's desk to another. It's allowing you to organize things and easily add things and edit things. Once you have the process documented, it's easy to then automate. What you've done then is move to the automation stage. You do not sit down at your desk and just wing and create this on the fly. This isn't like, oh, I think I do this next. This comes, I truly believe, through trial and error. The automation process is literally you taking what you did in fact do on paper and experienced to that next level. So what you're witnessing here through the automation is the documentation now refined.
Right. So you can definitely, like I mentioned, iterating to success. It's very easy to see somebody who's been involved in this process for a little while and say, that's what I want it to look like, and I'm hopelessly far from that, and throw up your hands. So the reason why I've taken you guys through a couple of steps of the way that we've done this is so you understand where we started by defining what we were after, by improving upon the, like Roger was saying, improving upon the flow of the information and understanding this happened and this needs to happen, then testing it on clients and identifying what didn't work, where our bottlenecks were in the process, going back to the drawing board, figuring out the way we wanted that to flow. And then as we got to a point where we said, this is really working, then we built out processes around it. And now that we've said, yes, we're validating, yes, this really is working, now we're going through the process of automating pieces of that. So it's, as accountants, don't be afraid of the lack of perfection in the process. If you engage and lean into the process, you will get there. But you have to start with where you are and iterate your way to success on that. Even if I were to like hand you my process, it might trigger for you a few good ideas of things you could include. But because the clients that I'm servicing look different, for example, we're a completely remote firm. So like anything that we do, those handoffs have to be able to hand from quote desk to desk in an automated remote environment. So my flow remote environment versus the flow of somebody else where all of the people within their company sit in office space is going to look so completely different. So there's in this space where all of our firms, the services that we're offering, the types of clients we're offering, and the environments in which we operate are so different. It's best for you to start with where you are, identify where you're trying to get, and iterate your way towards a more successful experience.
Exactly. Well said. Yes.
So I'm going to reiterate this one more time before we get into the next section, that this is so important. Your clients do not want to have to tell your team everything they've already told them. They do not want to have to repeat themselves. This does not reflect well on you. So the way that information is communicated to the sales teams needs to be captured in a way that can be passed to teams later on when it passes to that point. Because this point, if there's any one thing that has made our clients really mad, it's been when our fulfillment team comes in and re-asks all the questions that we've already answered for them. Very, very, very frustrating. So let's talk about what our external onboarding process looks like now. So this point, everything, the team has been determined, the systems have been set up, and everything previous to this point has all been done. Now we're actually turning and we're looking and we're engaging with the client. So the first thing we do with the client is we get account access. And oftentimes it's not actually the fulfillment team that's doing this. It is actually the onboarding team that takes care of this, them and some people involved in IT. And when we get on, this typically looks like a call. This is another area where I think we could probably automate a little bit, but for now, it's at least not working. It could be better, but it's not working. What we'll do is we'll get on the call with the client. We'll tell them, hey, this is going to be the most painful part of the onboarding process. It's going to take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, and we just need your engagement in this, and then everything from this point forward will run much more smoothly. So what this looks like is a call with the client where we come to that call prepared with the list of all the things that we're going to need account access to, and this includes everything across the board that touches accounting in any way. So it's online payment processors. It's for us, it's all the channels that they're selling on. It's inventory tools. It's access to their 3PL. It's also things like account access to their bank accounts, account access to their credit cards. It's things like making sure we have access to their QuickBooks file if we don't already have access to that. So probably one of the most important tips on this that I can give if you do this the same way we do is that this call for us always has at least 2 people on our side on this call. Usually this is a screen share with a client where they're actually logging onto their bank accounts and we're walking them through the process. So we're saying, click here, go here, do this, go here. We're walking them through the process of adding like account users to things so that they're not frustrated and confused. One person on our side is guiding this call, and there's another person behind the scenes. The client knows that they're there, but they're not as verbal or guiding the call. That individual is actually very all access points as the call goes. So for example, the client says, yeah, let me set up a account and access to Wells Fargo. So go on, he'll log into Wells Fargo, he'll set this up. That person behind the scenes is recording the password, recording the login name. Then that person verifies that they can log into that account. Because as you guys know, oftentimes the first time you log in, there will be things that have to be like, like you have to send a code to a cell phone. You have to send a code to an email to verify that, the two-factor authentication, or you have like questions that have to be answered. We used to find out the hard way that whatever password they gave us on the call didn't end up working, and then we'd have to have a follow-up call with them where we'd have to say, hey, we need to check this one more time. It was very, very frustrating because it usually happened on more than one access point, and then it became very frustrating. So what will happen is the person who's actually guiding the call will be asking all these questions, moving things through, and the person who's behind the scenes will be recording it, and then every few minutes they'll say, hey, Wells Fargo needs a code sent, and the client will tell them the code on the phone, or they'll say, hey, we need a security question for this, or this access point didn't work. Can we check one more time what the username on that was? So by the time the call is over, not only do we have credentials we need to log in, but we've also verified the ability to actually get in on all of them. It's really hard to succeed on a new client before these pieces are really in place. And we've had clients before that had like a gazillion accounts. We had one client that had like 18 bank accounts and have access to everything we needed until like 9 months into the engagement. And it just, oh my gosh, it was so painful for us. It was so painful for them. And it could have been completely avoided had we had an access call like this early on in the engagement.
So one of the things that fascinates me about this whole thing is I don't want to necessarily use the word new, but not knowing right now what other word to use, I'm going to say new. This is kind of a new thing that accounting professionals are dealing with simply because of the online access to all these accounts and the two-part authentication that's going on with everything. Basically what it is they could give you the password, but then all of a sudden, like you were explaining, there's something else that comes up that you're needing to get in touch with the client for them to help either authorize or permit you're
right.
then being able to work with it. If you've not consciously set this up as an expectation of we're going to do this together on Thursday for 2 hours and not just get your passwords, but literally go through and make sure we can access, that's huge because I think even though we may already know this, I believe the belief is I'm going to give you my passwords and I'm done. I can just send you an Excel spreadsheet and I'm done and I can walk away. Why do I need to spend 2 hours of my time with you people? This is ridiculous. But the reality is it's essential. You can't email your passwords and then assume that I'm off and running. So this is the new norm, if you will.
Right. One way that I think that we could improve upon this process, it's just not broken enough yet to require the attention from us to do this yet, is that I would love to send out a form like a secure form that allows them to tackle the ones that they think they know how to do. And then we verify those before those call. And then we deal with any ones that were not successful there on the call. So the call becomes a follow-up to a previous process that was hopefully a little bit less painful for everybody. But like I said, this is not, I mean, it's like a 1 hour to 2 hour call that's also gives us a chance to really show how well we know the platforms that they're selling on. I mean, when we can get onto their bank accounts and their platforms and navigate more successfully than they can the behind the scenes IT setups, they find it impressive. And so right now this isn't broken enough for us to fix, but that's probably what our next iteration on this would be.
Well, just to your point as to what's going on there, I think there are those exceptional clients that you can get where when you talk to them, they have some password protected Excel file that's listing all their passwords and all their accounts. And they go, oh yeah, I'll just send this over to you. Password is, and you're in the Excel account, and voila, you're going in. That's kind of the exception.
So the exception.
I agree with you. I think that's going to become more and more the norm as people are getting to that point. So yeah, excellent point. Thank you.
Yeah. So the next thing we do with the client, and then is we establish expectations. So I would say at this point, this is probably the point at which we are actually getting on a call with the client and the fulfillment team, and these are the things that are happening on that call. So this access call is separate, different, usually a different day even. And then we have the actual kickoff call. And during that actual kickoff call, there's several things that are happening. First of all, we are establishing expectations. Reestablishing expectations now that we have everybody on the call who's going to be involved in the fulfillment and the client. So we're recapping the scope. We're usually going through the engagement letter and saying we agree to this, and this. And that gives the fulfilling team a chance to understand what is and isn't in scope. Are we doing advisory services? Are we not? Are we doing this part? Are we not? The client is also able to hear us state that if they disagree with any part of it. That's their chance to kind of speak up. We talk about the rules of engagement, which kind of looks like things like we expect you to be responsive, expect us to be responsive. This is what that would look like. No, that's not a response within 5 minutes. Single time you email us, we have 4 hours during business hours to respond to you, or you'll hear from us within the couple hours of the next day. It's helping them understand what they can and can't expect. It's defining deliverables. So we're saying after the initial onboarding process is complete, then you can expect deliverables by the 15th of each month. We're talking about communication options at this point. Are we setting up a Slack channel? Do you prefer email? Do you prefer phone call? Do you prefer text? What is your communication style? And then we're talking about just overall, like, this is what we expect this to look like. This is what, if we're dealing with inventory for them, we're going to say things like, we're going to ask for, just for an example, maybe part of the process is that they're going to do a month-end inventory count, and they're going to have that back to us by the 5th of each month, and they can expect this, and this. So it's defining those types of things. The other thing that they're doing at this point is they're also meeting their team. This is just kind of a high level, like, tell us a little bit about you. It's kind of their resume at a high level where they're saying, yeah, I've been an accounting manager for such and such years. I'm a CPA. This is where I got my education at, so that they're understanding the capable hands that they're in. And then the last phase of this, which is not necessarily part of this call, is training the client. So sometimes it is, if it's simple. If we're setting up HubDoc for them, something like that, we've usually done that during the access call and given them access to it during the access call. But at this point, we're probably saying, okay, we're going to be using HubDoc to gather your information. Just to recap, this is how you're going to get data into HubDoc. Make sure everyone has it on their phone who needs it. Are there any questions about this? If it's something fast and easy, then it looks like that. But if it's more involved, like, this is what your inventory flow is going to be, this is the data we need from you, this is how we're going to interact with your sales tax process. There's usually that's not part of this call, but this point here, down through here, between get account access and establishing expectations, this is actually usually a client call. So here's a statistic for you that I made up, but I feel 100% confident in. Incomplete access will lengthen your onboarding time by 200% and create a 100% chance of frustration for all. So of all the things that we do during this point that really facilitate our ability to succeed on the engagement, it's the access call. That access call is the most important part of what we do. Without that, our hands are tied as accountants. We really cannot do the job that we've been engaged to do if we don't have access to the things that we need access to. And so that access call of all the things I just talked about is the most important part of that flow. So this is kind of what our flow looks like right now. And another way in which you can like script this out. So engagement letter signed, ACH fills out, introduction to our onboarding manager. She then engages in the process of scheduling all of those calls and meetings. Meanwhile, the IT team is launching all of the internal resources. Then we have an internal client preview meeting with the internal team where they've read over all of the sales documentation, and now the salesperson is engaged in a call. Usually this is like a 20-minute call where they're answering any questions and giving an overall feel of the client and just helping to familiarize the team with the client that they're taking on. Then we prepare for our client access meeting. So this is making sure we have a comprehensive list of everything that needs to be dealt with on that access call. Then we have the client access call. Then we have a client kickoff meeting. Then any client training part follows after. Now, I just, for my own sake, because this is the point we're at, is trying to automate this now. I indicated here whether this was a person meeting or something that could be automated with Zapier or email automation, or that we could create a video that would actually make this easy. So for example, with client training, what we intend to do is create a client training video that says, oh, you're going to be using Bill.com with us. This is how you engage with Bill.com. This is what this looks like. This is what your role is. This is what you do. So they have a chance to not only watch that video before they ask any questions, but also access it later if they have any concerns.
By the way, that client training, I think, is becoming more and more important as you and I go to the conferences.
Right.
We're exposed to so many more of these add-ons that can be done to the accounting software. And a lot of them are becoming not just nice to haves, they're becoming, I think, essential and must have.
Right.
And so the success in using these with the client depends upon their adopting them and they're using them. And so the more you get involved to ensure that they get excited about and use it, you benefit.
Right. I totally agree. So here, as I was preparing this presentation, I reached out to several firm owners that I have a lot of respect for, and I asked them what they do during the onboarding process and what their best tips were. So the people that I interviewed was Patty Scharf, Kenji Kuramoto, and Amanda Aguilar. They all own firms currently, and they're all, they conferences, they're thought leaders within the space. They're all really good at what they're doing. And this is what they said. First of all, this was one of Patty's suggestions. She said, charge for the assessment. It's a very time-consuming process, and I would add to that, charge for the onboarding if you're able to. So in order to charge for the assessment, you really need to be able to deliver something of value with the proposal to get paid for your time. In their case, they charge $1,000 to do a proposal for a client, but then at the end of it, they deliver like a 30 to 40 page document giving the clients all kinds of really great data about their company. So they're able to charge for it because they deliver something of real value when it's said and done. Having a dedicated onboarding team who owns it all the way through. This unquestionably the biggest thing we did that streamlined this, was we gave the responsibility to somebody. In our case, it's a part-time lady who works from home. She only really engages in this when we actually land a new client. So when we land a new client, we kick off the email and she puts in some hours that week onboarding the new client. And she owns it all the way through. She's also the one who's responsible for improving the processes. So we meet with her, our fulfillment, our service delivery director, who she answers to, actually meets with her on a monthly basis talking about how they can improve this process. And she owns it. So I don't know about you guys, but as a business owner, I wear like 50,000 hats. And any process that needs to be improved upon, if it like lands squarely on me, the chance of it actually moving forward in a timely manner is not great. So one of the things that we've done is anytime we have something that's just really critical, we'll actually give somebody that responsibility, and we'll try to isolate their responsibility to that as much as possible. That works really well for us because we have a team that works entirely remotely. So we have lots of part-time people on our team. So it's very easy for us to say we're going to hire somebody specifically for this, or this is a part-time person who's doing this and has plenty of time in their capacity to also own this project as well. This is one thing that has really required somebody who owns it because it is so critical. Pacing through the stages of onboarding. So one of the people that I interviewed basically says they anticipate it takes about 6 weeks to onboard a client, and so they'll pace it out. Will go out the first week, blah, 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 and they'll get like this is your training on Bill.com on like week 4, and this is your training on HubDoc happens like week 2, but they basically pace it out so it's not too overwhelming for the client. Another thing along the same lines is deliberately offsetting start dates. So we all hope to get to the point where new client opportunity is happening so quickly that we're overwhelmed, right? When that happens, and it will happen for you guys if you continue to be deliberate about your firm growth, it's important to not just agree to launch a client and start at any time. You need to have the courage to say, we can kick off for you 4 weeks from now. Deliberately offset those start dates so that your team is not overwhelmed, so the client has a good experience and the fulfillment team is able to do what you're promising that they would do. Probably one of the best tips I got that we intend to implement right away is communicating with clients in video form. So instead of having to take somebody's time to walk a client through HubDoc, walk them through Bill.com, walk them through all these things, create videos that can be embedded in emails that are delivered to them that at least become a resource to them to streamline this. And then automating all email communication through the process. So you have emails that are formatted, and you're just plugging in information into already formatted emails. Everything you can do to make it less time consuming for whoever's doing it means that they can then spend that time improving the process and handling more clients simultaneously, because they've cut down the time it takes to onboard a new client by 1/3. Suddenly they can onboard more clients without you having to hire more people to handle it. So that's the end of my presentation. Is there anything you want to add to that, Roger?
You bet. I want you to go back a step and basically just throw in a few things here. First of all, I love what Patty, Kenjay, and Amanda shared with you about what their firms do and strive to do in this whole process of onboarding. But there are a few things that I think might be helpful just to kind of add. You were talking about assigning a team to onboarding. There are some personality characteristics that I feel are important to this, and I just wanted to get your input. Genuinely, I think you want a caring person. You want somebody outgoing that enjoys working with people, that like to give that hand holding that the client may need. The second is you need someone that is very, very attentive to details.
Yep.
Because really you're ensuring that there's a juggle going on here. And if you've ever seen a juggler who's juggling like 3 things and then someone throws in a 4th and then a 5th and then a 6th, what's happened with the onboarding experience is this person is in essence kind of coordinating that with the business owner. And so what we want to do is make sure nothing's going to get dropped and all the balls are accounted for. And so you need somebody that's very caring and outgoing, pleasant, but you also need someone that is very thorough and attentive to detail. Those 2 characteristics, I think, are probably the paramount ones. Would you add anything else to that? Yeah,
I would definitely say that. This is a very, very, very client-facing role. And, your people who are setting up the IT resources behind the scenes can be like backward socially all you want them to. Client never interfaces with them, but this individual really becomes like the face of your company to the client during very critical phases. They need to be able to successfully navigate any like discomfort or issues that may come up during this. So I would definitely agree. They need to have great people skills. They need to be very detail oriented.
Yeah, and back to the patient and same-day surgery analogy, this is someone that has that good bedside manner.
Right.
They're the ones that as things come up, they're able to smooth things over, get the reassured that everything's fine, it's going to work out, we're going to make this happen, don't worry. The second thing I wanted to share, and this is maybe a little bit bigger as to a point, but a lot of times when working with clients, and again, my clients are accounting firms and owners of firms, what happens is they have very aggressive growth plans, and they'll say, well, I need 10 clients next month. And to your point, you can't onboard that many clients. Unless you're a huge firm, onboarding 10 clients, this is something that has to be done deliberately and intentionally. So you were talking about onboarding somebody and saying, okay, great, we can get you started in 4 weeks. Well, some people are saying, no, I need 5 clients this month, or over the quarter, I need 3 clients each month for the next quarter. And I just want to stress that if you're going to do this right and shine, as Brittany said at the very beginning, you need to understand that to bring on 1 to 3 clients a month is very robust.
Right.
If you run anything like 3 to 5 clients a month, is you're going all out, and I don't think it's
going gangbusters. Right.
Yeah, you might have a month where you take on 5 clients, but you're not going to do that 5 months in a row.
And incidentally, the other thing I would add to that is no individual team is going to be capable of successfully taking on more than 1 or 2 clients per month. And so if you intend to take on that many clients, you better have multiple teams that you're delegating that work to, so that no individual team is taking on more than 1 or 2 tops in a given month if you want to succeed. So the ability to scale that quickly really depends on the robustness of your entire organization. And the places you have that you can send new work without overwhelming your staff.
Exactly. No, this is huge, because honestly, I'll have a separate conversation with the client about onboarding when they're bringing on new clients. And when I'm talking to the owner of the firm, I'm talking about a business plan. What are your growth plans, marketing and sales? And it's interesting how the two oftentimes don't mesh.
Right.
I plan on taking 5 new clients on over the next 5 months. I'm going to bring on 25 new clients. And how are you going to do that? And what team do you have in place to achieve this? And there's got to be this marriage of reality to your goals. And so I just want to stress the importance of, yes, you have a very ambitious growth plan, and you can be very aggressive and successful in your sales processes. But there's the onboarding experience. And in order for you to shine and really benefit from all that effort you did in looking and finding and getting a new client, to now keeping them and having a happy client that you're engaged with, those are 2 very big things. And so I mean, that's probably a whole other conversation, but it's basically
maybe even 3 new conversations.
Yeah. So it's essentially marrying the business plan of growth with the processes of how are we going to manage and take them on. So that's my presentation. This was really, really good. So
great. Thank you.
One of the things that I love about your presentation is you speak from experience. You have a lot of authenticity as to here's what I've experienced. And I liked at the very beginning, you shared your own pains. Here are the signs that if you're experiencing this, you have a problem and you need to actually address it. So that's all wonderful. So 2 things in closing, and then just to ask and see if there's anything more you want to add. For everyone listening today, I've got 2 things that I'd like to just mention. One, everyone participating here, we're going to give you a chance to actually have access to a video where it's a class that explains now pricing your services. What are the right ways to basically bill the accounting services that you're offering your clients and making sure you're getting paid what you're worth. The second thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about basically this program here that you see over my shoulder, Pure Bookkeeping. And it's what you can do to literally get a jump start on having your workflow such that you can onboard these clients intelligently. You saw earlier, Brittany had this automated process. Well, there's basically a way that you can take and use the successful onboarding and workflow processes of multiple accounting and bookkeeping firms that have been refined, and now you have access to that. And so I'll be talking about Pure Bookkeeping a little bit. So in basically a thank you to you for listening. Just realize this, if it's about accounting, it is universal, and that's what we're here to do, is help you succeed and get paid what you're worth. So, Brittany, do you have any parting thoughts or offerings?
No, thanks for joining me, Roger. This was a lot of fun to do this dialogue.
Yep. It's a pleasure, and I look forward to perhaps doing another with you. This is a wonderful time of year. I hope everybody's looking forward to what it is you're going to do to make sure that this is your time to excel. And with that in mind, business success is universal. So take care and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Roger.